In this lecture we will discuss relevant costing. When making decisions, you need to identify the alternative actions that you can take. You then need to identify all of the relevant costs and benefits of those alternatives. You then select the alternative with the greatest benefit or lowest cost. Our focus in choosing between alternatives must be on relevant costs and benefits. Everything else can be ignored. In order to be relevant to our decision making, a cost or benefit must be different between our alternatives. If the cost or benefit is the same no matter which alternative is chosen, it is not relevant in making our choice between the alternatives. Assume that you rent a boat for $1,000 per month. With that boat, you can either conduct harbor tours or you can take people out to sea and let them fish off of your boat. With the two businesses, you will make the profits shown in the table. Notice that the fishing profit of $6,000 is $1,000 greater than the tour profit of $5,000. In our two choices, the rent expense was the same number. Since it was the same number for both alternatives, it wasn't relevant. If you remove the rent expense from our table, you see that the fishing profit is still $1,000 greater than the tour profit. Without considering the rent, you would still make the same decision. As you saw with our boat example, you make the same decision whether or not you include non-relevant information. So you don't need to consider it. Moreover, if you do consider non-relevant information, you may handle it incorrectly and make a wrong decision. Besides being different between your alternatives, costs and benefits must be paid or received in the future in order to be relevant. Past or historic costs and benefits are not relevant. Past costs are also called sunk costs. For example, assume that you own a large painting that originally cost you $10,000. You are now moving, and the painting will not fit in your new home. One of your alternatives is to sell the painting for $8,000. In evaluating this alternative, the fact that you originally paid $8,000 for the painting is not relevant. This is a sunk cost. You don't cry over spilt milk. You try to make the best choice now available to you, and that may involve selling the painting for $8,000. Let us now discuss opportunity costs. Opportunity costs are revenues that is only available if you choose one of your alternative actions. You don't get that revenue if you choose the other alternative. For that other alternative in which you don't get that extra revenue, you are supposed to list the lost revenue as a cost. It is a lost opportunity if that alternative is chosen. Assume that you have rented a store, and with this space you are considering operating either a DVD store or a comic book store. The space in your store is more than you need to display your comic book inventory. So if you choose to operate a comic book store, you will be able to lease space to vending machine operators, which will bring in an extra $200. You don't have any extra space if you choose to operate a DVD store. So the $200 extra revenue is only available if you choose to operate a comic book store. The lost revenue from the vending machines is considered to be an opportunity cost for the DVD store alternative, and it is listed with all of the other costs of the DVD store. As you can see in this chart, the $200 lost vending machine rent is listed as an opportunity cost for the DVD store alternative, and it makes the comic book store alternative $200 more profitable than the DVD store alternative. Alternatively, you could show the vending machine rent as revenue under the comic book store alternative. That would get you the same answer, that the comic book store alternative is $200 more profitable than the DVD store alternative. However, this approach is not the way that books teach you to handle opportunity costs. For exams, you must understand that the $200 is an opportunity cost of the DVD store alternative. We have focused only on quantitative issues in choosing between alternatives, and on an exam you will only consider quantitative factors in making such choices. In real life, however, you would also consider qualitative factors. For example, when deciding whether you should make a part or buy it, we will focus only on which alternative is cheaper. In real life, however, you would also consider such things as supplier reliability, the quality of the parts being purchased versus the quality of the parts that you make yourself, the morale of your workforce after you lay off the workers making the parts being purchased, whether your choice of alternatives could change if circumstances change, and whether you can resume production of your parts if you decide that you don't want to buy the parts anymore. Let's do a general example. Assume that you own a ship that takes passengers on a cruise to Catalina. Assume that the ship originally cost $2 million, it has a 20-year useful life and is depreciated using the straight-line method, producing an annual depreciation expense of $200,000. Assume that the operating profits from your Catalina cruise business is $500,000 per year. Assume that only the top half of the ship is used for the Catalina cruise business, and the bottom half is unused. Also assume that you are considering entering into an agreement with the Boy and Girl Scouts to take scouts on camping trips to Catalina, which will bring in an additional $15,000. You are trying to decide what to do with the unused bottom half of the ship. The figures shown do not include half of the depreciation expense, which is $100,000. You could use the bottom half of the ship to bring and take freight to and from Catalina. That would bring in an additional revenue of $70,000 and would generate extra expenses of $10,000. You could also use the bottom half of the ship as a floating disco. This would generate additional revenue of $90,000 and additional costs of $20,000. If you choose the floating disco alternative, you will lose the contract with the Scouts. This table lists all of the relevant costs and benefits of your two alternatives. Note that the profits from your Catalina cruise business is not shown. It is the same no matter which alternative that you choose, and therefore it is not relevant. Notice that the depreciation expense for the bottom half of the boat is not listed. It represents an expenditure for the ship that happened in the past and it is a sunk cost. Notice that the lost revenue from the Scout contract is listed as an opportunity cost for the floating disco alternative. Notice that the freight business is $5,000 more profitable than the disco alternative. As you can see in this table, you could have alternatively listed the Scout contract as additional revenue, and still reached the same conclusion that the freight business is $5,000 more profitable than the floating disco alternative. Relevant costing questions typically involve four situations, which are special orders for your product, keep or drop a product, make or buy a product, and sell a raw product or process it further and sell the processed product. Special orders typically involve a potential customer coming to you and asking you to sell him your product or service for a price lower than you normally charge. These problems normally mention that the potential customer is in an area not normally served in order to avoid issues of your current customers asking for the same cheap price. That statement also avoids antitrust issues concerning price discrimination. With a special order, your existing costs and revenues will probably not be an issue. You are usually happy with your current business and the special order won't change your current business. Your focus should be on the effect that the special order will have on the profits of your business. Think of your two alternatives as being don't take the special order, or take the special order. If the revenue from your existing business is capital A, then the revenue under don't take the special order includes capital A. The revenue under taking the special order also includes capital A plus a little more revenue, which we will call little a. If the variable costs from your existing business is capital B, then the variable costs under don't take the special order will also include capital B, and the variable costs under take the special order will also include capital B plus a little more variable costs, which we will call little b. If the fixed costs from your existing business is called capital C, then the costs under don't take the special order also includes capital C. You have to read the question carefully to see if there are any additional fixed costs from taking the special order. If there are extra fixed costs, then the take the special order alternative also includes these additional fixed costs, which we will call little c. Because revenues and costs that are the same between the alternatives are not relevant, you can disregard capital A, B and C, and focus on the additional revenues and costs generated by the special order, which are little a, b and c. When you read the question, it is important to ascertain whether your firm has sufficient capacity to supply additional units or services required by the special order. If you do, then you can produce the additional units or services without increasing your fixed costs. If you don't have sufficient capacity to produce the units or services required by the special order, and if you cannot obtain the extra capacity required to produce those units and services, then accepting the special order means selling your goods and services for the cheap special order price rather than the higher normal price you charge your existing customers. Assume that you own a small airline business that takes passengers by jet to a resort island with a deluxe conference center and hotel. There is a Motel 6 on the other side of the island. Tourists staying at the Motel 6 take a very long ride on a ferry to get to the island. The ferry charges each passenger $50 for a ride to the island. The patrons of the conference center take your airline and pay you $700 each for a ride to the island. One trip to the island costs you $3,000. Your jet can carry 10 passengers at a time. This means that it costs you $300 to fly each passenger to the island. Usually you take 6 passengers for each trip to the island, which usually leaves 4 empty seats on your jet. The owner of the Motel 6 offers to pay you $100 per passenger to take motel tourists on a standby basis to the island. You have determined that taking these extra passengers will not affect your current business. This table shows you the relevant costs and revenues in deciding whether to accept the special order to fly motel customers to the island on a standby basis. The $3,000 cost of the trip to the island and the $300 per passenger cost is irrelevant. You are paying this cost whether or not you accept the special order. The issue of whether you will make the trip is not in question. When you carry 6 passengers at $700 per person to the island, you make $4,200, which more than covers the $3,000 cost of the trip. Your only concern is whether accepting the special order will increase or decrease your profits. If you accept the special order, you will make $100 per person for a total of $400 without any extra costs. If you don't accept the special order, you will receive nothing. You should accept the special order because it will increase your profits. What would happen if you took the special order when you didn't have excess capacity? If you don't have any empty seats, the only way to take a motel customer to the island is to pass up taking a regular customer to the island. The cost to make the trip is the same regardless of who you take to the island. Since the cost to make the trip is the same, that cost is not relevant. The only relevant information is the different revenue that you will receive from your customers. If you take a motel customer to the island, you will receive $100 instead of the $700 that a regular customer would pay. Your income will drop by $600. With keep or drop a product type questions, you will probably see an income statement that shows that a product or a division is losing money, and you will be asked whether you should drop that product. What you have to remember is that you should only consider relevant revenues and costs. Revenues and variable costs exist if you keep a product and disappear if you drop a product. Therefore, revenues and variable costs are usually relevant and need to be considered. In the case of fixed costs, however, fixed costs may still have to be paid even if you drop the product. These fixed costs are not relevant and should not be considered. Consider the products contained in this table. It looks like Barbie and G.I. Joe are profitable, but it looks like the toy company is losing money on Gumby. Although the table says that the toy company loses $50,000 on Gumby, you can't be sure that the toy company will save $50,000 if it drops Gumby. You need to know more information about the fixed costs allocated to Gumby. Fixed costs can be unavoidable. You have to pay them even if you drop a product. For example, a product can be allocated a share of the rent paid by the company. If you drop the product, the company still has to pay the rent. Unavoidable fixed costs are also called common fixed costs because they are common to the whole company, not just the product in question. If you drop the product, you still have to pay the common fixed costs because the company is still in business. Assume that the factory rent of $100,000 allocated to Gumby is a common fixed cost that will not decrease if Gumby is dropped. Fixed costs can also be avoidable. You don't have to pay them if you drop a product. For example, you could pay a manager to supervise the production of a product. If you drop the product, you can lay off the manager and save his or her salary. Avoidable costs are relevant because they change depending on whether or not you drop the product. Avoidable fixed costs are also called direct fixed costs because they are directly linked to the product and go away if you drop the product. Assume that the $50,000 salary paid to the manager is an avoidable fixed cost. The rent is unavoidable and therefore it is not relevant. You should ignore it when making a decision of whether to drop Gumby. When you ignore the common rent, you see that Gumby actually makes $50,000, which helps pay the rent. It may not be enough to pay Gumby's share of the rent, but it is something. If you drop Gumby, you will lose the $50,000 the Gumby generates, but you will still have to pay the rent. When people see the $50,000 loss allocated to Gumby, they generally think that the alternative to the $50,000 loss from making Gumby is to lose nothing if you don't make Gumby. This isn't true. As you can see in the table, when you put Gumby's share of the rent as a cost for making Gumby as well as dropping Gumby, you see that you can either lose $50,000 from making Gumby or lose $100,000 from dropping Gumby. Because the rent has to be paid regardless of whether or not you make Gumby, it is not relevant and should not be included in your analysis. As you can see, you make $50,000 more if you make Gumby than if you drop Gumby. So that you don't make the mistake of dropping a product that you should keep, it is wise to set up an income statement as shown in this table. Under each product, you list only relevant revenues and expenses. You place common or unavoidable fixed costs under the total column. With this setup, you see how much profit each product provides for the company. If you drop a product, you lose this profit and your company's profits will drop by the profit shown. If you were to drop Gumby, for example, your profit will drop by $50,000, and you will only make a total profit of $50,000. If you drop Barbie, your profit will drop by $300,000 and you will lose $200,000. We will now discuss problems where you are asked whether you should make a product or buy it from someone else. Assume that an amusement park has a small restaurant. The restaurant serves 12,000 meals, and it costs the park $35 to prepare one meal. The cost of the meal is shown in the table. A caterer offers to provide the meals served at the restaurant for $33 per meal. The fixed overhead per meal consists of supervisor salaries. These supervisors have other duties at the amusement park and will continue to work at the amusement park if the meals are purchased from the caterer. Thus the fixed costs will not be reduced if the caterer is retained to prepare the restaurant's meals. Because the fixed costs are not relevant, they should be disregarded. The relevant costs are listed in this table and it is cheaper to make the meals rather than to buy them. We are now going to discuss problems where you have to decide to sell a raw good or to process it further and sell the processed goods. The classic example of this is oil well owners. They can sell the crude oil to oil refineries, or they could refine the oil themselves and sell the refined products to the public. Assume that you own a diamond mine that produces two grades of raw diamonds, grade A and grade B. Right now you sell the grade A diamonds for $700 per carat and you sell the grade B diamonds for $500 per carat. Rather than selling the raw diamonds, you could process the diamonds and sell the finished diamonds directly to jewelers. You could sell the grade A diamonds for $900 per carat after spending an extra $100 per carat to finish and market the diamond. You could also sell the grade B diamonds for $1,200 per carat after spending an extra $750 per carat to finish and market the diamond. As you can see in this table, you will make $100 more if you process the grade A diamonds and sell them directly to jewelers. On the other hand, you make $50 more if you sell the raw diamonds without processing them. The end.